March 23, 1945. 2100 hours. The west bank of the Rhine near Rhine, Germany. 28 soldiers of the 7th Black Watch squeeze inside a steel box on tracks. It looks like nothing they have ever trained for. It is 26 feet long, 10 feet wide, open-topped, and it was never designed for a European river. It was designed for a Florida swamp. The engine roars. The tracks bite mud. The thing lurches down the bank and hits the water. 4 minutes later, the ramp drops on the far side and the Highlanders pour out onto German soil. They are the first British assault troops across the Rhine at Rhine, and they crossed it inside a borrowed American swamp rescue machine that the British adapted into the most effective river assault vehicle in northwest Europe. This is the story of the Buffalo. By early 1945, the Rhine was the last great natural barrier protecting the German heartland. No modern army had forced a major opposed crossing of the Rhine in over a century. At the British assault points near Rhine and Wesel, the river stretched 300 to 450 yards wide, flowing at 3 knots. The Germans had opened upstream dam gates to raise water levels even further. Between Emmerich and Rhine, branches of the Alta Rhine created a double water obstacle. Low-lying polders on the eastern bank were deliberately flooded. Mudflats stretched beyond the dikes. The defences were formidable. General Alfred Schlemm's 1st Parachute Army deployed roughly 70,000 soldiers east of the Rhine. The 2nd Parachute Corps alone fielded 10 to 12,000 elite Fallschirmjäger across 3 divisions. The 47th Panzer Corps held the 116th Panzer Division and the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division in reserve, with roughly 3 dozen operational tanks between them. 814 anti-aircraft guns ringed Wesel. Gunners slept fully clothed at their posts. Conventional storm boats were the standard equipment for river crossings. They offered zero armour protection, carried only 10 to 12 men, and were completely at the mercy of a 3-knot current. Their engines were unreliable. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Richardson of the 6th King's Own Scottish Borderers would later deliver a damning verdict. He recommended the stormboat never be used again. Many of his men had to paddle with their rifle butts or their bare hands, landing hundreds of yards downstream of their objective. Britain needed something radically different. They found it in the most unlikely place. The LVT-4, landing vehicle tracked, Mark IV, began life as a hurricane rescue machine. In 1928, a catastrophic storm killed over 1,800 people around Lake Okeechobee in Florida. Donald Roebling, great-grandson of the man who designed the Brooklyn Bridge, spent the next decade building amphibious rescue vehicles in his workshop. His tracked Alligator could drive on land at 25 miles per hour and swim at 2 miles per hour. A 1937 article in Life magazine caught the eye of the United States Marine Corps, who saw immediate military potential. By 1941, the first production LVT-1 rolled off the assembly line at the Food Machinery Corporation plant in Dunedin, Florida. The LVT-2 followed in 1942, powered by a Continental W679A engine producing 250 horsepower, but both models shared a critical flaw. The engine sat at the rear. Troops and cargo could only enter or exit by climbing over the high hull sides, a process that was slow, exhausting, and lethal under fire. In August 1943, FMC engineers made a single design change that transformed the vehicle. They moved the engine forward, directly behind the driver's cab. This freed the entire rear hull for cargo, and allowed a large bottom-hinged ramp to be installed at the stern. The LVT-4 was born. That ramp changed everything. Troop capacity nearly doubled from roughly 16 to 30 fully equipped soldiers. Jeeps, Bren carriers, and 25-pounder field guns could now be driven directly on and off. Loading and unloading under fire became dramatically faster. Troops exited from the rear, shielded by the forward hull. 4 Buffaloes could lift an entire infantry company. According to production records, 8,348 LVT-4s were built during the war, the most produced variant of any LVT. The finished vehicle weighed 27,400 pounds empty, rising to 36,400 pounds fully loaded. It could manage 20 miles per hour on land and 7 miles per hour in water. Fuel capacity was 163 gallons. The cargo hold offered 541 cubic feet of space and could take 9,000 pounds of equipment. Base armour was thin, just under 2 millimeters of structural steel, but bolt-on applique kits added 13 millimeters to the front and 6.4 millimeters to the sides. Britain acquired its Buffaloes through the American Lend-Lease program. Approximately 500 LVT-4s arrived in British hands, designated Buffalo 4 in British service. All fell under the 79th Armoured Division, the specialist formation commanded by Major General Sir Percy Hobart. The vehicle itself was entirely American in design and manufacture. What the British brought was tactical adaptation. They concentrated all Buffaloes under a single specialist division, developed integrated combined arms doctrine, and built months of operational experience from earlier campaigns. Hobart's men added a 20mm Polsten cannon, 2 Browning machine guns, a number 19 wireless set, and 4-inch smoke discharges to every vehicle. Some received infrared lighting for night operations. The principal Buffalo formation was the 33rd Armoured Brigade, fielding 4 regiments: the 4th Royal Tank Regiment, the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry, the 11th Royal Tank Regiment, and the 1st East Riding Yeomanry. Crews trained on the River Meuse in the Netherlands, learning the hard way that approaching a riverbank at the wrong angle sent the whole vehicle spinning downstream. Now, before we see how the Buffalo performed on the Rhine, if you're enjoying this deep dive into British engineering, hit subscribe. It takes a second, costs nothing, and helps the channel grow. Right, let us get into the combat record. The Buffalo had already proven itself months earlier. At Walcheren in November 1944, RAF Bomber Command deliberately breached the island's dikes, flooding the interior. Just 11 operational Buffaloes from a squadron, 11th RTR, carried Royal Scots infantry through the lagoon, directly into the town square of Middelburg. According to after-action reports, approximately 140 British troops in those 11 vehicles accepted the surrender of 2,000 German prisoners. The German commander called the Buffalo's tanks to justify capitulating. Whether that was genuine confusion or a face-saving excuse remains debated, but the result was the same. The lessons from Walcheren, the Scheldt, and training exercises all fed directly into planning for Operation Plunder, the Rhine crossing. Montgomery assembled over 4,000 artillery pieces, a 66-mile smokescreen, the longest in history, and around 600 Buffaloes. The logistical scale was staggering, but what mattered most was what would happen in the water. On the night of March 23, 1945, 5,500 guns opened fire along a 35-kilometre front. At 2100 hours, Buffaloes of the 4th Royal Tank Regiment and the Northamptonshire Yeomanry carried the 51st Highland Division into the water near Rhys. At 2200 hours, the 1st Commando Brigade crossed at Wesel. At 0200 on the 24th, the 15th Scottish Division crossed between Bislich and Wienen, ferried by the 11th RTR and East Riding Yeomanry. The results were devastating in their efficiency. 4th RTR Buffaloes crossed the Rhine in 4 minutes. That speed was tactically decisive. A 4-minute crossing meant German artillery had almost no time to adjust fire onto moving targets. It meant troops arrived on the far bank as a concentrated, organised force rather than a scattered trickle. It meant the assault wave was across before defenders could react. The 154th Brigade loaded at 2030, entered the water at 2100, and reports confirmed troops on the far bank by 2106, 6 minutes from water entry to boots on enemy soil. The contrast with storm boats was absolute. The 8th Royal Scots of the 15th Scottish Division crossed in Buffaloes, and according to their battalion adjutant Captain Fargus, suffered no casualties whatsoever. He recorded that spasmodic mortar fire was directed at the vehicles but caused no harm. In the same brigade, on the same night, on the same river, the 6th KOSB crossed in storm boats and landed hundreds of yards downstream in complete disorder. The 46th Royal Marine Commando crossed in Buffaloes at 21:59 and secured their bridgehead in 15 minutes. Marine Fred Harris, of 45, Commando recalled that since nothing could be seen from the vehicles except the night sky and tracers overhead, there was little to do except try not to think about being sunk. Marine Tom Buckingham remembered that finding the way was easy, because the Royal Artillery had Beaufort's guns firing 2 lines of red tracers to mark the route. Over 3 days, from March 24 to 26, the 4 Buffalo regiments completed more than 3,800 trips. They carried the fighting strength of the Highland Division, the 15th Scottish Division, the 3rd Canadian Division, and the 43rd Wessex Division across the Rhine. Total Buffalo crew casualties across all those crossings were 38. Total vehicles destroyed, 9. Meanwhile, 16,000 German prisoners were taken. On March 26, Winston Churchill himself crossed the Rhine in a Buffalo of C Squadron, 11th RTR, accompanied by Field Marshal Brooke and Montgomery. No alternative came close. The DUKW, America's wheeled amphibian, carried less than half the cargo, had no armour, no ramp, and its wheels would have struggled severely on the Rhine's mud banks. American doctrine explicitly stated that LVTs handle assault work and operations involving mud, while DUKWs should not participate in assault operations. The British-designed Terrapin was even worse, slower in water at just 5 km per hour, unarmed, With no ramp and a tendency to swing violently if one of its two engines failed, Germany fielded no equivalent tracked amphibious assault carrier on the Western Front. The asymmetry was total. The LVT-4 went on to serve in Korea, Indochina, and Suez. Its rear ramp concept became the template for every subsequent American amphibious assault vehicle, from the LVT-P5 through the AAV-7A1 still in service today. A Buffalo believed to have crossed the Rhine was excavated from 30 feet underground near Crowland in Lincolnshire in 2021. It had been buried since 1947, when the Army used surplus Buffaloes to plug flood defences. The rear ramp still functioned. An American inventor built a swamp rescue machine. The Marines turned it into a beach assault vehicle. The British concentrated 500 of them under a single specialist division, rewired the doctrine, retrained their tank crews, and used them to carry an army across the most heavily defended waterway in Europe. 3,800 crossings, 38 casualties, 9 vehicles lost. The Buffalo was borrowed. What the British did with it was entirely their own.